Heart at the Hazbin Hotel, Chapter 33. Now that Heart is back, she tries to have things go back to normal, but instead of Alistair embracing her back into his arms, he seems to be pushing her away. So, yeah, Alistair's not happy. Let's see what happens. Chapter 33. Up in Flames. Heart's point of view. I was trying to sleep. All the girls had left me for the time being, so that I could try and rest. I was in a lot of pain from all my marks. I just hoped that they would heal faster, so I did not have to worry about being in pain while I moved. Dr. Talon told me not to take anything if it was at all possible. He did not know how medication would affect my body. I did manage to get Alistair's jacket out from under me. I still had it with me. It was covered in my blood, but it still smelled of him. It brought me slight comfort in his absence. I laid on my side, just looking off into the slight darkness of the room. I let out a sigh for what felt like the 100th time that day. I brought Alistair's jacket close to my face, as I got the smell of him in my nose. I had a smile. I didn't care if he didn't want to enjoy my return, but I still felt a great relief over me from him. Alistair still had not come back to the room yet, and it made me worried. I just hoped he did not go back out to find Valentino. He didn't need to get hurt over me because of this. I was afraid of what he would do to me once he returned. I honestly tried not to think of that. He wouldn't hurt me over this, would he? I feel that's something I shouldn't question at all with him, but honestly, I didn't know anymore. After all, when this happened, even though he came to my side when I screamed and held me tightly against him to comfort me, he still felt distant, like a force was around pushing him away. I knew that force was just myself. My whole being in general was pushing him away from me. I was trying not to cry again. I didn't want to get all emotional again over this. I understood Alistair wasn't happy with this at all, but I wish he would talk to me. I'm sure he had a whole mixture of emotions going on. Would he still love me? His mind playing with him over everything. Whatever he was feeling were even affecting his shadows. I could tell that they were staying away from me. His instincts as well were probably taking effect. My fingers traced over bite marks on my upper arms unconsciously. Marks that were not his. Scratches that were not made by his own claws. My scent to him probably felt off and almost threatening because of it was an enemy. Someone he needed to fight against. Of course, if he would take that need out on me, I would fight back. I would be afraid, but I could try and handle myself as best I could. I would fight for what I wanted. Even though this child wasn't his, it saddens me, but at the same time, I still cared. It was just how I was. I couldn't help that. I still had my caring nature from when I was alive, which is why I chose the name I did when I first came down here, tossing aside my old one. I flipped over gently so I wouldn't hurt as much. I went on my other side and just looked at the empty space beside me in bed. I reached a hand out and just glided it across the cold sheets. I just missed the bed being filled beside me. I wanted him with me. After these last few days, I just wanted his comfort and his presence, even though he probably didn't want mine. I just missed him so much, and his comfort was all I needed to have so that my bad things would go away. I didn't want to have nightmares again. I then heard footsteps out in the hallway. I knew it was Alistair because I felt the static in the air weigh me down slightly. I quickly closed my eyes and just pretended to sleep while I lay. I hoped he wouldn't notice that I wasn't asleep. I held the jacket close to me again as I brought my hand back close to me. I tried to calm my breath as best I could. I heard the static at the door. He was probably debating if he honestly wanted to come in or not. He was conflicting on coming in. I heard the static slowly die away, and then the creaking of the door opening. I heard nothing after. He must have just been standing there, looking into the room. I then heard his heels click on the floorboards. He was making his way over to the bed. I then felt a presence from behind. He was standing over me. I tried not to open my eyes or give hints that I was still awake, so I kept still. I then felt the hand reach out and touch my back from over top of the covers. I tried my best not to jump in surprise from the touch. He ran his hands gently down my back so to not hurt me, then rested his hand on my hip. He must have been in thought as he kept himself there a while. I then felt him grip the sheet on me. He sighed and let go of the sheet. I then heard him walk around the bed and into the bathroom. When I heard the door close, I looked up, wondering what he was doing in there. I heard some noise of things being moved around and then a hissing noise of pain coming from Alistair. Oh no, did he hurt himself? I was worried a moment. I closed my eyes again when I saw the light turn off and the door open. I heard his heels against the floor as he headed back to the bed. I felt weight on the other side, making the bed bounce slightly. I peeked my eye open and just saw his back as he was sitting on the edge of the bed with his head down. I was honestly trying to determine if I wanted to wake up to him or not. I was wanting to talk with him, but I honestly didn't know if he'd want to. Maybe I should keep it till tomorrow. He probably didn't want to talk to me anyway. I closed my eye again. I felt him shift and then lay in bed next to me, but he felt far away. He was probably looking at me, so I didn't want to peek. I felt his hand on my head and pushed a piece of hair out of my face. He traced his fingers down my cheek and ran his thumb against my bottom lip a moment. His touch was just so soothing and relaxed me. I just needed to feel some part of him to just let me feel safe. I heard him give out a small chuckle. "I know you're awake, dear," Alistair said softly. I slowly opened my eyes at that. Damn it, he was good. I moved my head to look up at him better. "How could you tell?" I asked him with a small smile. Alistair leaned down to me slightly. "I know more than you think, remember?" he said with a soft smile across his face. I gave out a small chuckle. "Sorry, I just couldn't really get to sleep. When I heard you coming, I didn't want to annoy you with me still being awake." Alistair placed a hand back on top of my head. "Are you afraid the nightmare will come back?" I looked away from him and bit my bottom lip lightly. "Yeah," I breathed out. I hid my face back into Alistair's jacket. "I tried to find comfort in your jacket, but it wasn't enough, so I stayed awake to await your return," I told him, my voice muffled from the fabric. Alistair took his hand away from my head. "Were you worried about me, darling?" he wondered. I nodded and lifted my head away from his jacket. "I always worry about you. Doesn't matter the circumstances." Alistair still had a small smile on his face. "I'm here now. So why don't you try and get some more rest, okay?" I frowned. "But I want to talk to you." I then yawned. Alistair pressed a finger to my lips once they closed. "We'll talk in the morning, all right? I promise." He took his finger away. "You won't leave?" I asked with a shaky breath. "I'll stay here with you as you sleep," Alistair promised me. I smiled. "Thank you." Although I was still saddened, I noticed he was still far away from me. He was only using his hands to touch me. He didn't even advance to pull me close. His smile almost seemed forced, which was not like him. I knew he would not hold me tonight. He was disgusted by me, so I didn't even bother asking him to do so. I accepted this, and tried not to cry at the thought. These last 3 days, all I wanted was to be back in his arms, and he wouldn't grant that to me. I would not force him. I never did. I closed my eyes and laid against the pillow. I held my hand out either way to lay on the bed. Maybe he would at least hold my hand. I waited for his hand to come into mine, but I did not feel it. I felt the urge to fall asleep until he did, but I was failing as I felt myself going into darkness slowly. He wanted nothing to do with me then. Before I slipped into darkness, I did finally feel his hand slip into mine. I did feel a small smile go across my face from his touch. I felt Alistair hold on to my hand tightly. I was just glad to have contact with him before I finally fell asleep. Hopefully, it would be enough to help subside my nightmares. I woke up in the morning without fear. I did not have a nightmare, and I was so happy about that. It seemed that with Alistair holding my hand, it was just enough for me. I was glad for that. I blinked my eyes open and saw that I was now facing the other way on the bed. I must have turned in my sleep. I lifted my head up and turned to look over my shoulder. Alistair was still in bed, but was facing the other way, so all I saw was his back. I frowned. It was weird. Usually I woke up with his arms around me. I turned my head back and let out a sigh. So much for getting his comfort. I wanted to see if I could try and stand. I have been in bed since yesterday when they saved me. I wanted to see if my wounds felt any better. I sat up in bed, and surprisingly, it didn't take that much effort. Some of me still hurt, but it was not as bad as yesterday. Hopefully that meant that I was healing. I swung my legs out from the bed and looked down at myself and let out a small sigh. I hope all these didn't leave scars. I would hate it all. Just a reminder of everything that happened. I was also still naked, which was still awkward, but it's all I could do until my wounds healed. I looked at the side of me and saw Alistair's jacket. I picked it up and put it around me. At least it was something. I tried to stand, but my legs were wobbly. I stood for a few seconds, but I fell back down on the bed. I let out a sigh of frustration. Damn, I was still a bit weak. You shouldn't try to stand on your own, you know, I heard behind me. I turned to see Alistair had rolled over to his other side and was looking at me. I still wanted to try, I whispered and turned away from him. Want me to help you? I was unsure of that question. How much help was he willing to give me? Maybe I shouldn't push it. I'll give it a few moments. I turned back to him. Don't want to push myself, I said with a chuckle. Alistair chuckled and sat up. He put his back against the headboard of the bed. Very true, my dear. You need to get more strength back. I smiled at him. He was being nice to me, at least this morning. I looked down and saw his right hand was all bandaged up. His black blood stained the bandages a little. I gasped in shock looking at his hand. I reached out and grabbed it gently. Al, what did you do to your hand? Are you okay? Alistair pulled his hand back out of mine. Don't worry about it. I just took out some frustration and did too much. I'll be fine. Alistair wasn't looking at me when he said this. I was surprised by his action of him pulling his hand away from mine with such force. Sorry, I was just worried, I whispered. Looks like he was still angry with me. He didn't even want me touching him. I just let out a sigh. So, I heard Alistair say, what did you want to talk to me about? Alistair asked. I looked up at him and he was looking at me. I then got nervous. Oh boy, what do I say? How do I start? Well, I was trying to think of what to say. I want to start by thanking you for saving me. I appreciate it very much. I will always save you, my dear. Nothing was going to stop me. I'm still your knight, Alistair replied with a small smile. I looked down at my hands in my lap. I'm just sorry for whatever Vox showed you. I took a pause. In that video, I mean. I tried to keep my tears at bay. Well, it was what confirmed me that they were the ones that kidnapped you. I was disgusted by that video, but at least it made my thoughts true on where to find you, Alistair told me. I bit my lower lip. Al, I promise you, whatever you saw in that video, It was not me. I looked at him and tried my best to look him in the eyes. I saw something in them I had never seen much before. Pain. Val had me under some spell. It wasn't truly me in that video. I swear to you. I felt tears build. What he did to me, I would never have ever enjoyed. I hated every moment of it. It was like I was watching myself and I was out of my body. I hated it. I let my tears fall, but I still tried to keep my eyes in the deer demons. I wanted to show him I was telling the truth. I forgive you for that, darling. I know that what Val can do, and I saw the spell he had on you. I know you. I know what you enjoy. He was too rough on you. I hated him for treating you the way he did. Alistair reached a hand out and placed it on mine. I still let my tears fall as I looked at him. Alistair, I'm still loyal to you. I promise you I am. You know that I would never bed another. I would never give my heart out like that to someone. Alistair squeezed my hand. I believe you, dear. But then he took his hand away. But it still happened, he said lowly. Oh no. I felt my heart sink at those words. I knew everything was going to go downhill now. Alistair slanted his eyes a moment. Even if it wasn't your fault, you were still taken by him, marked by another. He looked away from me. My urge to hurt you is very strong, since you don't have that connection with me right now. I was now afraid. So he was going to hurt me? I don't know what to do. I don't want to do that to you. You know I wouldn't hurt you. Alistair sighed, though. I just don't know how much I'll be able to hold my darkness back, though. I looked away from him. So, are you saying we should be apart for now? Alistair shook his head. No, it should be okay. I should be able to control myself. I wanted to believe him, but part of me wasn't sure. Can I believe you? I asked him in a whisper. Alistair looked at me. You don't believe I can control myself around you? He sounded annoyed. Given the circumstances? I don't, I whispered in response, honestly. I heard static come off of Alistair. You have no faith in me. I looked away and down at my lap. I gripped my bandages on my legs. Considering the way you've been acting towards me, I think it's you has no faith in me. I heard Alistair give a small static growl. That's not true. And looked at him. Prove it. Alistair just looked at me with wide eyes. He looked frozen. He didn't know what to do. I was expecting him to know, but it was obvious he was having trouble. He was holding back. I saw him fighting on what to do in his eyes. Part of me thinks that there was some part of him that wants to reach out and hold me, take me into his arms and love me like he always has. Then another part of him he was fighting with that urge to hate me, be disgusted in me, and want to rip me to shreds. Kiss me, hold me, tell me you still love me, Alistair, I told him sternly with anger. He looked like he was about to say something, but did not. He didn't move. Didn't say anything. He just sat there, looking at me. I saw him making his hands into fists. I was getting angry now. The bastard. How dare he? I just looked at him with tears of anger falling now. My heart was just breaking, and I felt it deep in my chest. I knew why he was acting this way, and it just angered me more. I was about to yell and say something to him when there was a knock on the door. I growled low a moment and looked at Alistair one more time, and then turned to the door. Who is it? I asked. It's me, Dr. Talon. May I come in? He asked behind the door. You may, I quickly answered. I heard Alistair behind me give a static growl. I honestly couldn't care right now how he felt about the scientist wolf even. I needed to honestly get away from him right now. I was relieved to see him come to my rescue. The door opened and the red wolf demon walked into the room. He looked at me with a smile, and then I saw him glance at Alistair in bed, and then got a frightened look on his face. He walked up to me with his fur standing up. I knew Alistair was probably looking at him with a glare. "Morning, Dr. Talon," I greeted him as he got up to me. "Morning, my dear. I hope you are feeling okay," Dr. Talon said in return. "I could be better, I guess," I answered him with a laugh. The wolf demon nodded. "Do you mind if I do some testing on you today? Just some small stuff. Ask you a few questions? It won't take long." "Of course you can," I told him with a smile. "Think you can replace my bandages as well? I want to see how well they're healing." The wolf demon nodded with a smile. "Of course I can," he said to me. "Can you stand on your own?" "I can try. I tried earlier, but I fell," I admitted to him with a chuckle. "Well, come on then. Let's see it," Dr. Talon encouraged. I tried my best to push myself off the bed, but had wobbly legs still. I stood longer than last time I tried. Dr. Talon came over and wrapped an arm around my waist as I put an arm around his shoulders. I leaned against him, and that definitely helped. "Think if I help you, you'll be okay?" The wolf demon made sure. I nodded. "It'll help. Thank you." We took a few steps, and it did help me with walking. My legs lost the wobbliness soon after. "Come on. I just got done setting stuff up. I'll take you to where Charlie's let me stay," Dr. Talon told me. "Well, I'm excited to see." I stopped and looked back at Alistair. His eyes were just glowing bright as he glared at us with so much hatred. I tried not to let it faze me. "I'll see you when I get back, Al. Okay?" He said nothing. He turned his head away as I heard his static rise. We went back to walking and closed the door behind us. To hell with him. He was being selfish. With help from Dr. Talon, we walked to the elevator at the end of the hallway. He pushed up and we managed to step inside. He hit the number 5 and we headed up. The walk was silent between us. I was trying to focus on walking mainly. Of course, I was still technically naked besides the jacket I had wrapped around me, but there wasn't much I could do about that. The elevator stopped, and we stepped out and walked a few steps to the first door on the left. Dr. Talon opened the door, and we walked inside. The room was basically transformed. Half of it looked like a small doctor's exam room, and half of it had a lot of his papers, books, and a bunch of other equipment he had laying around. Was surprised how fast he moved in. Probably had help from other hotel residents. "This looks amazing in here," I said as I looked around the room. "Thanks. Charlie was nice enough to let me take up 2 rooms. He helped me over to the table, and I sat down on top of it. I was honestly surprised. One for myself, and one where I can practice and still do my experiments and research," Dr. Talon said with a wag of his tail. I smiled at his excitement. "Well, I'm glad then. I also want to apologize to you for before." He was over at his desk and grabbed a clipboard. "Well, I think I'm the one that needs to apologize to you, my lady." He put a pair of glasses on top of his muzzle. "I'm sorry I came off as a creepy scientist guy. I didn't mean to. I just didn't realize what dark deed I was tricked into," he told me as he walked back over to me. "Don't worry about it, Doctor." I put my hand on his arm. "You were only doing what you thought was right for your experiment." Dr. Talon still sighed. "Yes, I know, but now I have you all in a tough spot with the radio demon." I waved him off. "Don't worry, Alistair will be fine," even though I was unsure of that fact. Dr. Talon looked through his clipboard of papers as he talked. "Well, I'm telling you now, don't get into any stressful situations right now since your body is adjusting to all the changes going on," he said sternly, pointing his pen at me. "Avoid arguing, if at all possible." I looked at him sadly. I do not know if that could be easily avoided right now. I still have to talk with him. I know he wants me to get rid of it, but I don't want to. So I'm going to try and keep calm in this situation when it arrives. Dr. Talon pushed his glasses back up his muzzle. To be honest, I don't know how I can get rid of it, if I could. I made this experiment to give sinners, souls of the damned, the chance to have children. It's up to their demon bodies to want it. The only way it would be possible if your body rejects the fetus and it causes a miscarriage. I nodded as he talked with his ears down. So, even though I'm pregnant and want to keep it, my body still might reject it? Correct. Stress can also play a part in it as well, just like in the mortal realm, he answered with a bounce in his step as he grabbed the chair. But I'm still doing research, which is where you are coming in. If anything happens, then I can try to correct the serum to make it better. He sat down in the chair. Plus, if you ever wanted to try again, now your body is used to having something done to it. It's used to the foreign body. I sighed from all the information he was giving me. Whatever happens with all this, I'll still help you. Dr. Talon smiled with a small wag of his tail. Thank you, milady. I appreciate that very much. I nodded and smiled at him as well. He clicked his pen and looked down at his clipboard. Now, I have a few questions I have to ask you, and I want you to answer them honestly as you can. He glanced up at me over his glasses. Can you do that? I'll try my best, I said with a tail wag. Dr. Talon then went through a series of questions with me. Most of them were about how I was feeling. I tried my best to tell him. At the same time, though, who knows if I would be feeling any better considering the circumstances of the situation between me and Alistair. Then, on top of everything I just went through with Vox and Valentino, it might take me a while to just heal mentally from all this. I had to try and stay strong, though. Do my best. I wasn't going to give up. Thank you for giving me your time with that. It's helpful in my research. Dr. Talon stood up. Now, how about we take care of those bandages? I can see how those are healing. Yes, please. Some of them are just annoying, I told him. He then gave a chuckle. Well, hopefully some of them are healed up enough to where they won't need to be bandaged up again. Then you can actually put on clothes. I blushed as I looked away with my head down, embarrassed. No need to be nervous about it. I'll get it taken care of. He put a clawed finger to his chin. Tell you what, why not get a bath first and get yourself cleaned up? I'm sure you'll feel much better after that. I looked up at him and wagged my tail. God, that did sound nice. That would be amazing. I haven't gotten a bath since I was kidnapped. I'm sure it will relax me as well. Dr. Talon smiled. Good. Now stay here and I'll get that ready for you. You can just use the bathroom in this room here, he said as he walked to the other side of the room. He disappeared into the bathroom and heard water running. He came back out a moment later. You want me to help you at all? The scientist asked. No, I can take care of myself. If I need anything, I'll let you know. I then tried to stand from the table. I grabbed it for a moment so I could steady myself. I eventually got my footing and slowly walked over to where the wolf demon stood in the doorway. Want me to take your bandages off for you? He asked me. I looked back at him. Sure, I know there are some I won't be able to get off myself, I said with a laugh. Dr. Talon gave a laugh as well. I took off Alistair's jacket that was still wrapped around me. He said he would give it to Charlie so that it could be washed. He then went and started to unwrap and take off my bandages. As he took them off, I just kept looking in the mirror at myself. I just looked at my reflection with my ears down. I looked at myself before, but now seeing all the marks that were on me as the bandages came off, it was then that I realized how bad my body truly was. I looked at my back and it was the worst sight I've ever seen. Even Alistair never left marks that deep. No wonder Alistair had a problem with me. I just looked at myself in disgust. I still had the thoughts going through my head. I was impure. I was tainted. I was disgusted. How could he even love me after all this? I honestly do not think he would. We might just have to start back at square one if we have to. It is honestly something I didn't even want to think about. Once Dr. Talon was done, I thanked him and he walked out of the bathroom. I just stood there a few minutes more, looking at the marks on my body, tracing some of them with my fingers. My hands ran across my body, and they stopped by laying at the top of my stomach. I hugged myself a moment. I just gave a sigh and then got into the tub. The warm water felt amazing. I did not realize how much I was aching until the warmth just relaxed me. I almost fell asleep. I did manage to wash myself off, and God, did it feel amazing. I was just so sticky and gross from the last few days. I was just glad to get it all washed off. When I was done, I got out and wrapped a towel around me. Dr. Talon came back in and went to take care of my wounds so that they could heal properly. Surprisingly, some of them had already healed and the rest of me was healing well. The marks on my thighs were thinning out and would probably go away soon. Some of the bite marks on my shoulder had to be taken care of still, but they looked better than before. My bruises had gone down a lot as well. He wrapped me up again because of my back. It was the worst, like I thought. Other than that, I was all okay. Dr. Talon had Charlie bring me up some spare clothes she had, and I was just glad I didn't have to walk around naked anymore. They were big on me, but I would rather have it that way right now. I just wanted to try and be comfortable. Now, if anything feels off or you don't feel good, come to me. I'll help you the best I can. I appreciate your time with me, Dr. Talon said to me as I buttoned up the shirt I was wearing. Of course, I was glad to help you out, I said as I finished buttoning up the last button. Would you like me to escort you back downstairs? Please, I just don't want to fall, just in case, I answered. Dr. Talon smiled with a wag of his tail. Let's head off, then. He held his arm out to me, and I looped mine into his just in case to steady myself, and we went back to the elevator. We got back to the second floor, and we walked to Alistair's room. We said goodbye outside the door, and I walked in on my own. I walked into Alistair's room, feeling much better with my wounds being better healed and not having to be restrained with my bandages. I looked around the room and saw that Alistair was no longer in there. I frowned. I wanted to show him how well I was healing. I sighed. Looks like I was going to be alone again the rest of the day. It was about some time in the afternoon. I just laid in bed, lost in my thoughts. I was broken out of them when I heard the door open and saw Alistair walk into the bedroom. I got excited to see him. I made sure to smile as my tail wagged fast and my ears went up. Hi, Al. I was wondering where you have been today. I stood up from the bed, my legs no longer shaky. Look, I can stand on my own now, I said excited to him as I gave a small twirl. All he did was look at me. His hands were behind his back. That's good, dear. I'm glad to see you're getting stronger. He fixed his monocle. I also see you are now decent. I looked down at myself. Oh yeah, I have never been happier to get clothes on. I laughed. Charlie gave me some of hers to borrow. I was expecting him to at least come up to me and give me a hug, but he didn't. He just stood there, looking at me. I took a step towards him. Dr. Talon said that my wounds are looking good. They should be fully healed within 2 days. I took another step. Although the ones on my back will take a little longer, I informed him. I wanted to show you when I returned, but you weren't here. Alistair was silent again. I've never heard him be so quiet. I was concerned. He was always so talkative. I walked up to him, but he took a step back. I can tell that you're clean as well. Good thing you washed yourself. I was tired of that stench you gave off, he said with a slight venom in his voice. I tried to brush off how he was acting towards me. Oh, believe me, I was so glad to get a bath and get washed off. I felt so gross, I told him. You still smell off, though, Alistair growled low as he stared down at me. My ears went back a moment. Well, Dr. Talon said that my scent will be a little strange at first because of my body going through changes. I let him know. I stood uneasy now by his behavior. Fascinating. Alistair said in a sarcastic tone, then huffed as he walked past me and towards the bed. I stood there with my ears down. My wings even fell. I couldn't even cheer him up by being chipper. That usually always worked. If I was happy, he was happy. It always seemed to brighten his mood. Although he wasn't happy. He hasn't even kissed me at all today. He was usually all over me. He didn't even say he loved me today. He always says it to me. Every day. I had to fix things if I could. I couldn't stand this. I turned around and walked up to where he stood in the middle of the room. I reached out my hand to him and placed it on his arm. He turned around to look at me. Al, I'll let you do what you need to once I'm all healed. It might take me a while, but I'll be able to be fully yours again. I smiled a little. In time, Alistair said as he grabbed my hand and took it off his arm. I was saddened by his action. Why was he doing this? There was more than meets the eye here. Alistair, if there is more to this, then please tell me. There's not, Alistair quickly answered. Then why don't you want to touch me? I snapped in anger. I think you know why, Alistair snapped back. His eyes glowed red at me, and I saw the world around him distort. Oh, I knew why. My eyes slit in anger. If this has something to do with the baby, then you're being selfish, I yelled at him. I'm the one being selfish, he screamed back at me. You want to keep this devilish thing. Why? Why keep it when it's not even mine? His eyes just glowed more with anger. Because that doesn't matter to me, I told him. A life is a life, Alistair. I don't give a shit about its life. It's Valentino's child. To me, it almost like a sign that in the end, he won the battle. I don't want that. I will not be responsible for it. He looked at me sternly. I want you to get rid of it. I looked at him, and I felt my anger start to rise. I needed to hold back, though. I didn't want to transform into my dragon demon form. Not now. I was supposed to keep calm like Dr. Talon wanted me to, but that was becoming impossible. No, I said sternly. Alistair gritted his teeth. I will not be the father figure to that abomination, Alistair said, pointing at me. Then don't. Just go ahead and leave me then, I growled at him, my tears falling. His gaze softened for a split second, but disappeared. He was still fighting. I know he loves me still, but this situation was making it too hard for him. A constant struggle, and he couldn't get out of it. I still want to be with you. Just get rid of it, and we can go back to how things were. Then how come you haven't said you love me today? How come you haven't kissed me at all? I woke up this morning and I expected your arms around me like normal. But no, I was cold and alone. You're the one acting like a child. I looked at him as I bared my teeth. I said no, I won't get rid of the baby, I repeated. Alistair's world had distorted and the voodoo symbols around him appeared. His eyes glowed as he was just staring at me with anger. What he did next was something I never expected him to do. There was a loud smack that was then heard throughout the room. I was then on the ground from the sudden action and surprise. Alistair had slapped me. I looked up at him as I held my stinging left cheek. My eyes looked at him with shock as I felt fear go through me. He hit me. It was a smack, sure, but he still hurt me. He said he would never do such a thing. I had tears fall a moment as I looked up at him, as his antlers grew bigger from his head. If you won't get rid of it. He had a dark and creepy static voice now. He held his hands out as his long claws gave off a glow. Then I will. He lunged at me. No! I managed to dodge away from him in time. This now had me spiked in anger. Not only did he want to hurt me, but now he would do anything to get rid of this child. even if that meant hurting me in the process. I could not let him do that. I hated fighting, and the last person I wanted to fight was Alistair, but he gave me no choice in the matter. I transformed in my dragon demon form without even a thought. I would have no control over myself, but it was the only choice I had. The bandages on me ripped apart and fell off as the clothes I had on started to rip as well when I grew. I stood tall above Alistair now and roared down at him. I slashed my claws down, but he jumped out of the way. I felt something at my feet. I looked down and saw tentacles wrapping around my legs. I took a breath and breathed fire onto the ground below me. I would be resistant, but the tentacles didn't seem to. I heard Alistair yell in pain. I looked at him to see smoke coming off his hands. I jumped at him, and in the process we crashed through the door of the hotel room. I pinned him up against the wall, my dragon claws digging into his neck. He then kicked me right in my snout, and I let him go as I stumbled back in pain. I then felt something hit me, and I went flying down the hallway. It must have been one of his tentacles, because I felt something wrap around my leg again. I grabbed onto and pulled it, digging my claws in the process. I heard Alistair give a grunt from the action, but it backed off. Alistair disappeared into the floor as a shadow. I tried to follow him, but I lost sight of where he went. I managed to stand up and walk down the hall slowly as smoke came out of my nose. I then felt pain shoot up my arms. I let out a roar of pain and looked behind me to see that Alistair's shadow had grabbed me, digging in its long claws into my arms. I tried to get out of its grasp, but it held on to me tightly. It dug its claws in deeper. Now his shadows were attacking me as well. I roared louder from the pain. I looked down to see Alistair appear out of the floor in front of me. His eyes were aglow in anger. His antlers stood high above his head. He had his big, evil smile on his face. His radio static bounced off the walls and annoyed my ears. His voodoo symbols danced around him. He summoned more tentacles to wrap around my legs. He walked up closer to me and placed one of his long claws on my chest. "Don't worry. It won't hurt long," he said deeply and laughed. The radio demon started to slowly move his claw down my chest, digging it into the flesh of my underbelly, not protected by scales. Blood escaped from the wound and fell onto his fingers. I let out a roar of pain at the feeling. "Alistair? Hard? What's going on up there?" I then heard echo through the hallway. Alistair froze a moment. It was Charlie. I looked to see her stop at the top of the stairs and was standing at the end of the hallway. She had a look of fear on her face as she looked at us. At this moment, I lifted my tail and swept Alistair off his feet. He fell to the floor and his concentration broke. His shadow and tentacles let me go. I reached down and grabbed Alistair with my clawed hands and chucked him down the hallway. Charlie screamed and ran back down the steps as Alistair landed at the top of the stairs. He rolled a few times, but caught himself and was kneeling and slid to a stop. He looked back at me with glowing eyes that almost seemed to burn through me. I ran at him. My anger just pulsated through me at this point. I did not even care. I jumped at him, but that was a wrong move as Alistair summoned more tentacles and caught me midair. He had more this time. He was not holding back now either. Knowing him, it wasn't even his full power I was fighting against. He had trapped me, having the tentacles wrapping around my legs and my torso, around my neck and around my chest so that I couldn't use my wings. His hands glowed brightly as I watched him twist his hand and close it slowly. I then felt the tentacles around my neck start to tighten. "Alistair, stop it!" I heard Vaggie scream. I looked down the steps and saw everyone was down in the lobby and looked at us. They all gathered at the bottom of the steps. Charlie had turned her head away from us as Vaggie held her hand. Angel had a look of pure horror on his face. Husk looked so pissed at Alistair as Nifty hid behind the cat demon. I glanced back at Alistair and all I saw was that same fire in his eyes. There was darkness in them as well. The look of pure hatred. That thrill of the kill he was experiencing. The tentacle around my throat tightened more. I had to stop him. I took in a breath and released fire down onto him. I then felt the tentacle tighten and cut off my fire. I could not breathe. I started to just fight against his tentacles, but they had a tight hold on me. I couldn't breathe now. I couldn't get air in or out. My anger faded, and now all I felt was fear. I slowly felt myself turning out of my dragon form, the tentacles around me adjusting to my changing form. I tried to fight against it, but I was failing. "Alistair, let her go!" I heard Charlie yell this time. I knew she was crying at the scene before her. All of them didn't know what to do. They were all frozen in shock from what was happening. The last thing I wanted my friends to see was us fighting, and then Alistair trying to kill me. My vision was slowly fading. I had black spots going across my vision. I was slowly losing consciousness. I stopped my fighting and squirming. I then felt pain and went through my entire body. I don't know what it was or why I was feeling it, but it was just a shot of pain that went through me, almost like a stabbing. I screamed from it all, and the last thing I saw was Husk tackling Alistair to the ground. The tentacles released me, and I felt myself fall, but I faded in the darkness before I hit the ground. End of chapter 33. Wow. Writing this chapter really hurt. Like, it hurts. Like, just all the angst and stuff and them fighting. Like, I just can't. But until next time, guys, I'll see you around.